Hey everyone, welcome back to Berlin Noir, and welcome to the third overview episode of the series. This is episode 45, and up to this point, I've been doing every 15 episodes a overview episode to show you all what has been built up until this point. So you can see stuff that was built earlier on that most of us have forgotten. And if you're new to the series, you can see where we are currently, but also just to give you all, ideas of what you want to see built and also ideas of what you want to see updated, since there's going to be a few things, especially earlier on in the video, of areas that definitely need to be updated. Stuff that was just built earlier on that isn't really quite up to standard anymore. But so as we look out over this zoomed out picture here, you can see there's definitely a lot to be built. The center of the city is mostly filled in, but I've kind of built out in kind of random directions and just building more or less interesting areas around the city and places that many of you recommended to build. But so if you are new to this series, Berlin Noir is based on the late 1920s in Berlin. Particularly, I use the year 1929 just to be a little more specific, but more or less it's just the late 1920s in the city. And the goal is to recreate it and many of the things that were lost to the city and just basically recreate it as it was. But so to start off, as I have in also the previous two overview episodes, we start here in the center of the city at the Brandenburg Gate. This was the very first episode, and considering that, I think it turned out pretty decent. But this whole area from the Brandenburg Gate pretty much all the way to Museum Island, so Unter den Linden, the avenue that goes through the city there. A lot of that can be updated and changed, but also some things such as this with the Reichstag building here with the river along it. It doesn't, in real life, it doesn't run parallel like that, but it's a little too late to update that type of thing. Also, like the glass dome on the Reichstag, I've tried many ways to try and get rid of that, but it just, unfortunately, there's nothing that I can use to put on there, and converting the building to PO basically gets rid of 90% of it for whatever reason. So I'm kind of stuck using the modern building there. But then stuff like this here, the Gendarmenmarkt with the two cathedrals there, that turned out, I think, pretty well. That was, I think, basically, that was a very early episode, but at that point, I believe someone had given me the Tagesspiegel website that has the 1928 aerial view of the entire city, which was a total game changer. It allowed me to actually recreate with accuracy the city, which up until that point I was more or less just using Google Maps, which of course for obvious reasons Berlin today is much different than it was in 1929. So other things like this here, this is a tram depot right in the center of the city, which obviously needs to go away. I just have had that hidden there from the very start just because I needed trams in the city and I wanted that building located near to where I started out. But you would, I guess, if you're familiar with the city, then you would notice that a lot of those clips that were just show some things that definitely need to be updated in the center of the city. But basically everything between Brandenburg Gate and Museum Island. So, yeah, I've definitely got to get around to that at some point. We'll see what I can do if I find the correct assets, because there's a lot of interesting buildings there that need to be replicated if I want to recreate it accurately to the time period. But anyways, moving from there, we had the Tiergarten there just a second ago, and then this is the Berlin Zoo, which I absolutely love how it turned out. This is actually one of my favorite builds just because I more or less just built the zoo how I wanted. I actually located it differently than where it is in real life. I put the zoo on the north west side of the Tiergarten along the Spree River there, which is at the top left, whereas in real life it is on the southwest corner. Basically, that was intentional just because I had already built up a lot of the area where the zoo is located in real life, and I didn't feel like getting rid of all those buildings and things that I had built. So I decided to build it on the other side there, which I don't think is a huge deal. Again, it's it's still located next to a river there, so you still have that at least. And considering how nice it turned out, I am definitely content leaving it there. I do also think that a portion of the tier garden could be updated as well, especially the avenue that used to exist, the Victory Avenue, as it was called, that led straight to the Victory Column in front of the Reichstag. That could definitely be built, and just kind of updating that side of the tier garden that's closer to the Brandenburg Gate, I think would add some nice details to that park. But so moving on from that, we are now to the two train stations that were first built pretty early on in the series. This one here being the Potsdamer Bahnhof at Potsdamer Platz, which I definitely need to update as well, considering how important Potsdamer Platz was back then as well as today. My version, which was built again very early on, doesn't quite capture its importance and the size, so that's definitely something that will be updated pretty soon as well. There we see the Anhalter Bahnhof there at the top. But considering this was built pretty early on, once again, I think it turned out pretty good. Once again, I was very grateful that I had that aerial view at this point. Otherwise, I wouldn't have really been able to build these stations that accurately. Even though this area is pretty old, I did update this little plaza out front, the Anhalter Bahnhof here, as well as we recently built those two modern-looking buildings there, the Europa House and the Deutschland House, which were built during this time period in the late 1920s. But yeah, it definitely turned out quite nice. A little port there, which no longer exists in the city, but did back in this time period. But it's always really nice seeing the trains come in over the canal there, coming over those bridges and coming into the station. It's nice. It's pretty fun to watch them do that. But other than that, I think the biggest goal here is just simply to update the Potsdamer Platz and just that general area there, just to make it a little more bigger, and again, give it that vibe of being, it's the important location that it was back then and still is to this day. But so now we're back to closer to the center of the city on the other side, this being the Museum Island, which was also something very early built. For that reason, some of the assets that I used were kind of, I don't know, I used PO a lot because a lot of the assets that were on this Museum Island were not available yet, such as this one here, the Berlin Palace, which is a recent addition to the workshop. Several months ago it was released, but that's certainly very important. The Berliner Dome there, that large cathedral there, and the Altes Museum, I believe it's called. Those were available earlier on, but the other ones above that, I kind of just had to use PO and throw some buildings together, combine them, and I guess it works. I'd of course love to have the actual assets come out sometime so I can update it, but for now I think those are going to stay there, and yeah, unless something changes, assets come out, it's going to stay like that. Here's something that could be a quick update. This is the Wiesenbrücke here, which was built for, or not for the competition. There was a competition for this, but during that time, I actually didn't participate in the competition, oddly enough. But you'll see the two versions of the museum there, the Märkisches Museum. The one that's in the correct place is the one that I made with kind of custom using procedural objects. And then less than a week later, the actual asset came out, and I've just been I haven't wanted to move it because I like how the custom PO version came out, and I think I want to use that building elsewhere. I'm just not quite sure, but that'll be an easy update, just kind of swapping the buildings out and putting the real asset in. But so here is Alexanderplatz, which is also in a super important location back then and today, so I wanted to make it accurate. At this time, it was under construction. They were removing some of the buildings, and I believe they're also adding an U-Bahn line, which I recreated there. Also to the left there, that really large red building is the Berlin police station, I guess the central station. And I used the town hall asset, which is there on the left, the Rotes Rathaus. I used that asset to create it, so they are certainly similar. But yeah, I changed it up enough, and it's it's a very large asset, and it's quite intimidating for sure. But I think for the most part, Alexanderplatz is pretty good. Maybe some small changes here or there, but nothing too big. But so here we have Bülowplatz, which is today Rosa Luxemburg Platz. Just a cool little area. I like the triangular shape with a theater there. Also, we built the Communist Party headquarters there, which is that building there on the left, which, as you see, the May 1st banners there, which we're trying to stir up remembrance for the events when the police just shot up some communist protesters for no reason, which that was certainly an important event in the city's history. And I wanted to recreate that. And also, for anyone who has seen Babylon Berlin, the show, another reason I wanted to recreate that as well. But so, moving on from that, this is the Charité Hospital, which, speaking of TV shows, I've also seen both of those. So I also wanted to create that with some accuracy. I had troubles finding buildings that really matched, so I used the one with the black roof there. Wasn't my first choice, but it was symmetrical, which was important. I also used that building there with the red brick and the bluish roofs, which are actually, I think, from a university in Tennessee in the US, if I'm not mistaken, but they match really similarly to the actual buildings. It's just there was a limited number of shapes, and it just I was a little more limited because of that, so I didn't use that for the complete hospital, which is why I use those other assets as well. But right next to that, we have this train yard, which was my first train yard build. The other train yard was actually guest build, which that we'll show in a second. But I really like how this one turned out. Since it's so large, it certainly takes up a lot of room. It took a lot of time to build, but a lot of detail for sure went into it. And leading right up to the Lehrter Bahnhof, which is another custom station since that asset did not exist on the workshop. The one thing about this area here is it's a little scaled down. It's a little squished. It just kind of happened that way since the city is not a one-to-one recreation. Some areas are scaled up, some are scaled down. So this area just happened to be a little more squished than I would have liked. Missed out on some of the size of the rail yard and also some other buildings that were located there. But other than that, it turned out pretty good. This here is the guest build that I mentioned a second ago. This was the first rail yard built in the city, and I gave it to Ping Yao, who unfortunately doesn't make videos anymore. But I liked it because he was really into detailing, and he did a great job. And the fact that I was quite intimidated for building something like this at the start of the series, considering how large it is, was a really nice addition and very detailed. So I definitely enjoyed adding that to the city. So this here is the Bell Alliance Platz, which is now Marienplatz. This is one of my favorite locations just because there's the center circle there, that kind of roundabout building with the canal going through there and the train station there and just kind of the curves. I don't know, I really like this area and I like how it turned out, and it was definitely fun to build. The only thing that's, I guess, not really accurate is that station in real life is on the left side of the bridge there. The only reason I put it on the right, which I don't know, I guess it's kind of dumb. I could have worked around it. But the only reason was because that side on the left is a little curved, the track. And of course, the station is not curved, it's just straight. So that's why I decided to go on the other side, which, not a super big deal. No one's actually complained about it before, which I was always surprised about. But yeah, for that reason, yeah, I'll just keep there. It's not a super big deal. So here, I guess moving back towards the end of the Tiergarten here, that station there, I guess, would be considered the Zoo Bahnhof, since it's relatively close. I did skip like a station or two on that side of the city, since, as I mentioned already, some areas are scaled down and just kind of squished. That area especially is just missing some space, so that station there, I guess, kind of works for two in the area. But this here is a little industrial area. This is the Royal Porcelain Factory, if I'm not mistaken, which someone wanted me to build, and was, I think, the first industrial area I built. And if you've been following the series, then you know this city has almost nothing for industry. That I just showed you, and this here was the only industry for the longest time. This was, I wanted to make something a little more different. Like I made that thing on the left, the building on the left there is a movie prop business, and then right there with all those trees is kind of like a tree nursery, and then just some, random piles of coal or sand or whatever that is. So yeah, that was, for the longest time, those two things were like the only industry in the city. Here's a really nice custom avenue and intersection, I guess, that I made. I really like how this turned out, considering it looks pretty unique, and I love the tram tracks going all those different ways, and recreating the road how it was back then, considering it looks like that. It's a little weird, but it was definitely glad that came out well, and definitely would not have been possible without the node controller mod. And that was actually done using the original one, the one that doesn't nearly have as many capabilities as a new one. But yeah, considering that, it turned out pretty well, I think. Here's the Technical University, which is right next to the intersection that was just on screen. Pretty early build, early on, which was very convenient since that asset already existed, and the creator actually made it as it looked before the war. So definitely nice that it actually fits the time period there. So this here, we are now out in Charlottenburg. This is the Charlottenburg Palace, which is something I wanted to build for a very long time, but it's definitely a decent ways outside the center of city, and I think this is the furthest thing. Actually, no, I take that back. The airport is, which we'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, for that reason, I did wait a little long to finally get around to building it. But once I did, was a two-part episode actually, and I kind of combined two different elements, because looking at the garden, I saw many different ways in which it was designed. One which had the nice hedges and kind of geometric shapes, triangles, different paths going different ways, and then others, and including the aerial view, kind of had more natural paths and a lot of tree growth, and looked less like the type of garden you'd see at like Versailles or something like that, and more I guess natural, organic, which someone actually later on told me that that's what it was changed into. I forget who exactly wanted it to be changed that way, but they wanted to get away from the kind of rigid structure of the paths and the trimmed hedges and go to more of a natural feel. And so I guess I kind of combined both of those, since I think a little before this time is when it kind of transitioned. So I guess I captured both of those elements there. But this here is Kudamm, one of the fancy avenues in Berlin that leads right to the Kaiser Wilhelm Church there, which was, when I was actually building this, I was about to build it without the church, since it didn't exist on the workshop yet, the asset. But it was perfect timing. Less than a week before I was getting ready to build it, the asset popped up on the workshop. And of course, at that point, I was like, awesome, I'm definitely doing this now. And I did. So yeah, I really like how that turned out there with the church there, and then the park with the train station there. It looks really nice. So this is one area that I built a while ago and then did a major overhaul. Because initially this elevated U-Bahn line that comes out from underneath the church there was connected to the main S-Bahn line, and which obviously is not accurate if you're familiar with it. So I did change that, but even so, I only have this one station here. That's the the Nollendorf Platz, I believe, and the Nollendorf Platz, and I miss out on two other stations. One being the Wittenberg Platz, which is just a normal U-Bahn station, right? So underground, which would be in between that station and the church, and then also another elevated station to the right. So this is again one of the areas that was just kind of scaled down, just to how the nature of me building it and how it kind of turned out. So it definitely would have looked weird to have all those stations there. Wouldn't have had enough room or space. If I planned ahead a little better, I could have done two. Kind of made them a little more off-centered. But nonetheless, the Nollendorf Platz train station, that asset was on the workshop, and so that's basically why I decided just to do that one, for that reason, and considering the space was rather limited. So here is the area that I believe is the furthest from the center of the city. This is out in Neukölln, and that is the Templehof Airfield. And that was a pretty interesting build, considering it. I mean, it doesn't look obviously like a modern airport by any means, but it was cool because seeing pictures and such of the airport, I learned that it was very common for people to go out just to spectate seeing planes, because obviously at the time, commercial transportation, I guess, by airplanes was very rare. And so seeing planes come in with people was obviously, I guess, a novelty. So people would go there, eat on that center building there. I have chairs and tables, and they had restaurants there, so people could just observe the planes come in, which is a cool little thing that people did back then. But this is where I first built the allotments in the city, which is right beneath the airfield here. And I love how these things turned out. They are very repetitive, yes, and very time-consuming to build, which is why I have not built any more, just because it took so much time and effort. And most of them are, like, each one is more or less alike in its own way. There's a few that are copied that I just kind of had to finish up. But I love how it looks, much more trimmed. And since that's how it was back then in the 1920s, whereas today, if you look at them from like Google Maps, you'll see that there's definitely a lot more growth, especially from trees. I know we talked about it in that episode, the crazy rules that are associated, or at least subjectively crazy, maybe from a non-German standpoint, but the very strict rules, I'd say, regarding like maintenance and stuff with the allotment gardens, which back then was extremely strict, but from what I've heard and read, has gotten a little more lenient in recent time as they try and attract like younger people and such to own some of their own allotments. Since I guess some people don't want to have such crazy strict rules regarding how they can grow stuff in their gardens. But nonetheless, moving on from that, this is now basically what has been built in the past few episodes, very recently. Since we've only, I think, 4 episodes back since I had that little hiatus where I wasn't making any YouTube videos for the series. But we started off with the Hermannplatz department store there a second ago, a very large building there. And staying in a similar area, we moved to some gasometers here, which for the longest time, looking on the aerial view, I had no idea what that was. But I finally had confirmation in some pictures I saw that they were in fact gasometers. So I figured I'd build that and kind of ugly up, I suppose, parts of the city, which, of course, considering it's the 1920s, there was plenty of dirty, grimy areas in the city. It doesn't matter where you are in the world in the 1920s, that was the case. So I love adding just kind of, I guess, so-called ugly locations in cities. I know they're not very popular with a lot of people, because whenever I do stuff like that, those are my those videos have the least amount of views. But I don't know, it adds character to the city and is certainly important for realism to have stuff like that, considering the 1920s were not some perfect time in Berlin or anywhere else in the world, obviously. So yeah, definitely important to capture those type of areas. And whenever I have a chance, I try and I recreate those when I can. But so here what we're zooming in on is the Louisianstadt Canal, which was built in the last 2 episodes, which at this time was being filled in and converted to a sunken garden, since I guess the canal wasn't really useful and would kind of become stinky and stagnant during parts of the year. So they decided to fill it in. So for part of the garden, I have it like this, being filled in, people working on it, kind of ugly, dirty. Again, trying to capture that somewhat ugly feel again in the city. But other parts of the garden, such as this here, you know, I have it fully decorated, fully planned out with bushes and hedges and trees, because of course you need that contrast between the nice and the not nice. And yeah, this is certainly a very cool and unique area. I'm glad I believe someone told me about this, since on the aerial view it just kind of looks like a dirt, I guess a dirt canal. There's nothing there. There's no water, but there's no plants or anything. So in the aerial view, since it's 1928, a year before where the series is taking place, I guess it's completely in the process of still being filled in. So it's a little, you can't really tell anything from there. But yeah, it looks nice there with that reflecting pool there, with the church there, and just the paths and everything came together really nice. But this is here the last shot for the video, at least before we have one more just complete aerial view of the city. But just showing this is basically everything built in the last few episodes, with the canal there, and then kind of in the distance there with the Hermannplatz and the gasometers there. But I definitely think I want to continue working in this area, since as you can see, all the roads have been planned out, and it's definitely just kind of waiting to be filled in there. Everything there on the right there in Kreuzberg is, yeah, as you can see there, I put all the roads in. I did that a couple episodes ago off camera, since I'm very slow when I get around to doing that type of stuff. But yeah, that's something definitely on the list to complete in the near future. But this is now the point where, after seeing all this, seeing stuff that we've built before, seeing stuff that should definitely be changed, I want to hear what you all think. What you want, again, to see built in the future, and what you want to see redone. So even if I didn't mention something that should be redone and you think it should be redone, then let me know, and if it's reasonable and a good idea, then I'll definitely try my best to fix it. So that's going to do it for today's episode. If you're new, definitely subscribe, since as you can see, there is a whole lot more to be done in this series and a whole lot more videos coming up soon. If you're interested in flying around Berlin Noir yourself, or building in 1929 Berlin, then definitely consider checking out my Patreon. You can get access to this save game file and build around yourself, as well as a whole lot more. And for everyone else, hopefully you guys enjoyed, and if you did enjoy, then definitely consider giving the video a thumbs up. I'd love for people to find this particular video, since it's a nice intro, regardless of if you're new to the series or if you've been around for a while. So yeah, that is going to do it, and I will see you all next time.